The night has already settled over the northern coast, and the sea is calm. There is no wind to speak of, only the long, unhurried breath of water meeting sand and drawing away again. The day is over now, and there is nothing left to do but rest. Let your shoulders lower. The ground holds the resting body, the way the shore holds the tide, without effort, without asking for anything in return. The moon sits low over the water, wide and pale, and its light lies across the surface in a soft, broken line. The sea is dark and smooth beneath it. Each small wave rises without hurry, curls once, and folds itself down onto the wet sand with a sound like a slow exhale. Then it slides back, thin and silver, and the sand shines for a moment before it dims again. This has been happening all night, and it will keep happening long after the last watcher on the shore has drifted away into sleep. The cool air moves over the shore, faint with salt, carrying the smell of wet stone and kelp and clean water. It is a gentle cold, the kind that makes the warmth of rest feel deeper. Somewhere far out, past the reach of the moonlight, the water is very deep and very still, and it is waiting for no one. It simply is, the way old things are, patient and vast and kind. The old people of these coasts told a story about that deepness. They said that beneath the waves there lived a king, the Sea-Tsar, an ancient and quiet ruler of the water. He was not a cruel figure in the way the story is often remembered. In the older, softer telling, he was mostly a sleeper himself, a great slow presence who kept the tides moving the way a heartbeat keeps its steady time, without thought, without strain. The fishermen spoke of him the way one speaks of the weather, with respect and without unease. Tonight there is no storm in this story. There is no wreck out on the rocks, no sailor lost, no bargain that goes wrong in the dark. Those are other tales, told to keep children close to the fire. This is the calm one, the one meant for the end of the day, when the only task left is to let go. The sea here is a friend, slow and enormous and endlessly forgiving, and it has all the time in the world. Watch the moonlight for a while, if it pleases you. See how it never holds still and never rushes. It lifts a little as a wave gathers, then spreads and softens as the wave lies down. The pattern repeats and never quite repeats, always a little different, always the same underneath. There is nothing to follow and nothing to remember. Each small wave can carry a little of the day away with it, as it slides back into the dark. The breath, unwatched, may be growing slower now, matching the water without being asked. In like the wave gathering, out like the wave lying down. There is no need to make it happen. The body knows how to do this, the way the shore knows how to meet the sea. Every muscle can grow a little heavier. The jaw can loosen. The hands can open. The long day is behind now, and it can stay there on the far side of the water. Down at the waterline, the foam gathers in soft lace and then melts. Small stones, smoothed by 1,000 years of tides, gleam and go dark. A strand of kelp lifts and settles. The sea is doing what it has always done, keeping its slow rhythm through the night, and it will hold that rhythm whether you watch or not. So you may close your eyes now, if they are not already closing, and simply listen. The waves will keep breaking, soft and low, and each one is an invitation to sink a little further into rest. The tide is coming in slowly, the way it always does. Nobody hurries it and nobody can. Along the flat shelves of rock that run out into the shallows, small pools have filled with seawater, and the moon lies in each of them, a little coin of pale light held perfectly still. The story drifts on now, out along those pools, toward the edge where the land gives itself over to the sea. In the older telling, there was a traveler who walked this shore at night, a gentle person with no particular hurry and no particular fear. Some say it was Sadko, the musician, who carried a set of Gusli, an old stringed instrument cradled under one arm. He had played all evening for the people of the town, and now he walked out to be alone with the water and to let the music settle in him before sleep. His footsteps were quiet on the wet sand. The pools shone as he passed them. The kelp lay in long, dark ribbons in the shallows, lifting and swaying with each gentle surge, and the water was so clear that he could see the pale sand beneath it, marked with the soft ripples the tide had drawn. Little fish moved there, silver and unhurried, turning together and drifting apart. A crab, small and patient, crossed one pool and vanished under a fringe of weed. Everything moved slowly. Nothing was afraid. The night was wide and quiet, and the sea breathed in and out against the rocks. The traveler sat down at the edge of a broad pool and rested the Gusli across his knees. He did not play yet. He only listened, the way one listens near deep water, to the small sounds that gather when the wind is gone. The faint tick of a wave settling among the stones. The soft suck and release as the tide moved through a channel in the rock. The distant, low sound of the open sea further out, more felt than heard, a long, soft breathing that never stopped. It is a good thing to listen like that, without waiting for anything. The mind, given nothing to chase, begins to slow. Thoughts come, and instead of following them, one can simply watch them drift off the way the little fish drift, turning and gone. There is nothing here that must be solved tonight. The tide will rise and it will fall again, and the rocks will be here in the morning, and none of it depends on being watched. Out beyond the shallows, the sea lay flat and dark to the edge of sight, and the moon laid a single pale road across it that went nowhere and asked to be followed by no one. Now and then the long swell of the open water reached the shore and lifted the kelp and set it down, and the pools brimmed and sank, and brimmed and sank, keeping the slow time of the deep. A single seabird stood on a far rock, folded and still, its head tucked beneath its wing. The stones held the day's faint warmth a little longer against the coming cool. Nothing on the whole shore moved quickly. The night had gathered everything into its slow patience. The water and the weed and the sleeping bird and the small pale moons in the pools, and it held them all without effort, the way deep water holds whatever is given to it. The water rose a hand's width up the rock while he sat, so gently that he did not notice the moment it happened. The pools joined the sea again, one by one, their still moons dissolving into the wider dark water. The kelp lifted a little higher. The cool air moved once across the shore, carrying salt and the green smell of the shallows, and then went still again. Far below the calm surface, the story tells, the Sea-Tsar was beginning to stir in his sleep, the way a great slow creature turns once in the deep and settles again. It was not a waking. It was only the tide, which was his breath, drawing gently in. The whole coast felt it, and no one was troubled by it. The water simply came a little higher up the sand, and the moonlight spread a little wider, and the night went on being soft. The traveler let his eyes half close. The Gusli lay warm against him. The sound of the water folded over itself, again and again, low and even, and he felt the pull of it, the old kind pull of deep places that only want to rock you and never to keep you. He leaned back against the smooth rock, and the sea kept breathing, and the tide kept rising by the width of a hair, and there was nowhere he needed to be. You may feel that same pull now, gentle and patient, drawing you down toward rest. In the story, the traveler dreamed that he slipped down into the water, and it did not frighten him, because in the dream the sea had no cold in it and no weight. He simply leaned toward the pool, and the surface opened like a door, and he drifted down through the green, slow as a falling leaf, into a light that was soft and everywhere at once. The water near the surface was pale and full of moon, threaded with thin, bright lines that swayed as the small waves passed overhead. A little deeper, the light turned the color of old glass, a dim and living green, and the surface above became a shifting silver ceiling, far away now and growing further. There was no rush in the descent. He sank the way the tide falls, without effort, a hand's width and then another, held on every side by the gentle water. Long ribbons of kelp rose past him as he went down, their broad leaves turning in the current, brushing softly and letting go. Fish moved through them in loose silver crowds, unbothered by the drifting figure, parting around him and closing again below. Their scales caught what light there was, and gave it back in small, quiet flashes. Everything down here moved to the same slow measure, the long swell of the open sea passing through the deep like a breath drawn over many minutes. The temperature of the water was even and mild, neither warm nor cold. The way a room can be exactly right, and you forget your body is in it at all. That is how it felt to sink through the green. The traveler forgot the edges of himself. His arms drifted where the water carried them. His breath in the dream needed no air, only the slow rhythm of the deep, and so it slowed to match, long and even and quiet. For a long while there was nothing to mark the descent but the slow change of the light, from pale to green to a deeper green still, and the drift of small bright things rising past him toward the surface he had left. A scattering of pale motes turned in the water like snow that had forgotten which way was down. A jellyfish, soft as a slow breath, opened and closed and opened again, lit faintly from within and drifted by without touching him. The chill one expects of deep water never came. The heavy pressure of the deep never gathered. There was only the mild and even water, and the long, slow sinking, and the green light thickening below into something that was almost warmth, almost welcome, drawing him gently on. Below him now the light gathered into a wider glow, still faint, still green and gold at its edges, and out of that glow the first shapes began to rise. Tall, pale columns, far apart, taller than the trees of any forest, lifted from the seafloor and vanished up into the dim water above. They were not sharp or made by any hand he knew. They looked grown rather than built, smoothed by ages of slow current, pale as bone and pearl, standing in long, quiet rows that faded into the green distance on every side. It was the outer edge of the Sea-Tsar's country, the story says, the place where the open deep gave way to the halls of the sleeping king. There were no gates and no guards. There was only the water growing gradually more still, and the column standing patient in it, and a soft light with no clear source. The way the light of a snowfall has no source and simply fills the air. Nothing here demanded anything. A traveler could pass among the pale pillars and be neither welcomed nor turned away, only carried gently onward by the current. Down and down the current bore him, so unhurried that the going felt like rest. The columns drifted by on either hand, tall and dim and quiet. Now and then a slow shape moved between them far off, a great fish or a fold of current, too distant and too calm to be anything but part of the piece. The green light held everything. The long swell breathed through the deep, and the traveler sank on toward the heart of that country the way one sinks, at the end of a long day, toward the bottom of sleep, where the water is warm and dark and completely still. The hall of the Sea-Tsar lay at the bottom of the calm, and it was the most restful place in all the deep. There were no walls to it, or none that could be seen. It was simply a wide floor of fine pale sand, smooth and rippled by the slow current, and over it stood the great pearl pillars in their long rows, glowing faintly from within, and above it hung the dim green dark that was the whole weight of the sea, holding everything softly down. The light here came from the pillars and from the sand itself, a low and even glow, gold and green and gray, never bright, never dim, exactly enough to see by and no more. It did not flicker. It did not move. It lay over the hall the way moonlight lies over snow, quiet and complete. A traveler drifting in over the pale floor would feel the noise of the mind grow smaller and smaller, until only the slow breathing of the deep remained. And there, at the center of the hall, on a low seat grown of the same pale stone as the pillars, sat the Sea-Tsar himself. In the gentle telling, he was an old figure, broad and slow, with a long beard that drifted in the current like pale weed, and robes the color of deep water that stirred without hurry around him. His eyes were half closed. He was not angry, and he was not waiting for anyone. He was mostly asleep, as he had been for a very long time, keeping the tides in their courses with the slow rise and fall of his breathing. For that was his only work, the old people said. The Sea-Tsar did not rule the way a king on land rules, with orders and judgments. He ruled the way the moon rules the tide, by simply being there, vast and steady, letting the water follow him. When he breathed in, far above, the sea drew up the beaches all along the coast. When he breathed out, it slid gently back. He had done this through more nights than there are grains in the pale sand, and he would do it through more nights still, and none of it cost him any effort at all. The traveler came to rest on the soft floor near the center of the hall, and the great figure did not stir to greet him, and this was not unkind. It was the deepest kind of welcome, the kind that asks nothing. He could stay or drift on. He could rest here on the pale sand under the glowing pillars for as long as the dream allowed. Nothing would be required of him. No question would be asked. The Sea-Tsar breathed his slow breath, and the tide answered far above, and the light lay even over everything. Around the edges of the hall, half seen in the dim green distance, other slow shapes drifted and settled. Great calm fish turned in wide circles and grew still. Ribbons of weed rose and lay down again. The daughters of the sea, the story sometimes says, moved somewhere out among the far pillars, their pale forms drifting like slow smoke, humming a low sound too soft to be called a song, more like the sea remembering a song it once knew. It did not carry words. It only rose and fell, and folded into the breathing of the deep. Here at the bottom of the calm, there was nothing to fear and nothing to do. The traveler lay on the fine sand and felt the great slow presence of the sleeping king near him, steady as a shore, and the low glow held him, and the weight of the whole sea pressed down on him as softly as a heavy blanket. His thoughts, what few remained, drifted off among the pillars and did not come back. The music of the far pale figures rose and fell. And the deep went on breathing, patient and enormous, rocking the whole quiet country gently in the dark. After a long while in the dream, the traveler remembered the Gusli that lay across his knees, and he began, very softly, to play. He did not play to wake the king, or to ask for anything, or to be heard at all. He played the way one hums at the end of the day, only to let the last of the music out before sleep. His fingers moved slowly over the old strings, and the notes drifted from them into the water and hung there, round and soft, before fading into the breathing of the deep. Underwater, the sound did not carry the way it does in air. It moved slower and lower, and it seemed to come from everywhere at once, a gentle trembling in the water itself. Each note spread out in a wide, patient ring and grew fainter and gave way to the next. There was no tune to hold on to, only a slow rising and falling, a few soft notes and then a rest, and then a few more, matched to the long breath of the sea. It was the kind of music that asks nothing of the one who hears it, that only smooths the way toward rest. The little fish came to the sound. They gathered out of the dim green in loose silver crowds, drawn not by hunger and not by fear, but by the gentle trembling of the water, and they drifted around the player in slow turning rings. Some of them carried a faint light of their own, pale blue and green, small drifting lanterns that rose and sank with the music, so that the dark water near the player filled with soft moving points of light, turning without hurry, going where the slow notes led them. The notes moved outward in slow rings and passed among the pale pillars, and the pillars seemed to hold them a moment and let them go, so that the music lingered in the great hall long after each note was played. It gathered in the high, dim spaces overhead and came down again softened, folded into itself, until the water all through the hall was faintly humming, low and warm, a sound with no edges. The fine sand stirred in small, slow patterns beneath it. The weeds swayed to it. Even the far daughters of the sea seemed to still their own low humming to listen, so that for a time the only sound in all that country was the Gusli, drifting and patient, and the long breath of the deep beneath it, the two of them winding slowly together like two currents meeting and becoming one. The Sea-Tsar on his low pale seat did not open his eyes. But the old story says that a smile passed slowly across the ancient face, the way a ripple passes across a still pool and then is gone. The music pleased him. It was the sound of a small, kind thing at rest in a great, calm place, and it folded into his long sleep as gently as a stream folds into the sea. His breathing did not change. The tide rose and fell far above exactly as before. But the whole hall seemed to soften a little further, the glow to steady, the current to ease, as though the deep itself were listening and growing calm. The pale figures out among the far pillars took up the low sound and carried it, humming it back through the dim water, so that the Gusli and the sea seemed to be playing to one another, slow and soft, across the wide floor of pale sand. The notes and the humming and the long breath of the deep all moved together now, one gentle rhythm, and the drifting lantern fish turned in it, and the weeds swayed in it, and there was no edge any more between the music and the water and the sleep. The traveler played more and more slowly, and the rests between the notes grew longer, and in those rests there was only the vast, soft breathing of the sea. His hands grew heavy on the strings. The Gusli drifted a little from his lap and hung in the water beside him, turning, its last note spreading out and out into the dark and never quite ending, only growing thinner, folding at last into the sound of the deep. And the lantern fish turned once more around the two of them, the sleeper and the sea, and the light of them lay soft over the pale sand. Everything here has slowed almost to stillness now. The music is nearly gone. The great figure sleeps on his low seat with a ghost of a smile, and the sea breathes over him, and the pale fish drift in their slow, bright rings, going nowhere, needing nothing. There is no more story to tell for a while, and no need of one. There is only the deep, and its long breath, and the last soft note fading, and the warm, dark water holding everything gently down toward the floor of sleep. Slowly, so slowly that no one could mark the moment, the light in the hall began to dim. It was not the coming of any danger. It was only the deep growing deeper, the calm growing calmer, the way a room dims as the last lamp is turned low and the house settles for the night. The pale pillars faded first at their far ends, up in the green dark, and then along their long pale lengths, until only their nearest glow remained, soft and low over the sand. A wide, gentle current had begun to move across the floor of the hall, warm and unhurried, and it carried everything with it toward the deeper places. The drifting lantern fish went with it, their small lights growing distant and dim, turning once and sliding away into the dark like sparks carried off on a slow river. The ribbons of weed lay flat and streamed softly in one direction. The fine pale sand ran in low, quiet lines. And the sleeping traveler in the dream was carried too, without waking, deeper into the calm. There was no fear in it, because there was nothing here that could harm. The current was only the sea gathering everything gently inward, the way sleep gathers the body inward at the end of the day, loosening the hands, letting the head grow heavy, drawing the mind down past its last thoughts into the dark where it rests. Down the slow current bore him, past the last of the pale pillars, out over a floor of smooth, dark sand that stretched away into a stillness with no edge and no end. The Sea-Tsar's hall was behind him now, or below, or all around. It no longer mattered which. The light had grown very soft, a deep and even dimness, warm as a banked fire, dark as closed eyes. The long breath of the sea went on, slower here and lower, felt in the whole body rather than heard. Rise, and the far tide climbs the distant shore. Fall, and it slides away. Rise and fall. There was nothing else, and nothing else was needed. The traveler settled at last onto the dark sand of the deep floor, and the warm current lay him down and moved on, and he did not stir. Above him the whole weight of the sea rested, softer than any blanket, holding him without pressing, dark and vast and kind. The last faint light dimmed to almost nothing, only enough to know that the water was there, that it went up and up forever above him, that he lay at the still bottom of it, safe and small and completely at rest. And there the story sets him down, and there it leaves him, in the deepest calm of the Sea-Tsar's country, with no waking and no return, because none is needed and none is wanted. He is only asleep at the bottom of the deep, rocked by the long, slow breath of the sea, and he will rest there as long as the tide keeps moving, which is to say forever, which is to say through this whole long night. Now the story too grows quiet. There is nothing left to follow. The great king sleeps, and the traveler sleeps below him on the dark floor, and the pale figures have folded their low song back into the water, and the lantern fish have drifted off into the deep. Only the sea remains, breathing its long, even breath, rising and falling over everything. Let it breathe for you now. Let each long wave far above carry you a little deeper. There is nowhere to go and nothing to do. Only the warm, dark watcher and the slow tide, and the long, good rest that is already beginning. From here the words fall away, and only the sea is left. There is nothing more to listen for, and nothing more to know. The long waves are breaking somewhere far above, gentle and low, one after another, each one folding down and sliding back, and beyond them the distant surf keeps its soft and endless sound, the breathing of the deep that never stops and never hurries. Let it hold you now. Let it carry you the rest of the way down into sleep. Rest here as long as you like. The sea will keep breaking, soft and low, all through the night.